Today's presentation is all about fireworks. We'll be talking about how fireworks are made, prepared, set up, and displayed. We'll be talking about large fireworks, kinds you go to see, as well as the kinds you can do in your own backyard. Fireworks are really known as pyrotechnics, and we'll be talking about what you should know about fireworks. The word pyrotechnics refers to the art, craft, and science of fireworks. We're talking about the chemical and physical phenomena that characterize pyrotechnic reactions. Pyrotechnics really originated around the 1st century AD in China with the invention of black powder. It's only in the last several hundred years that science has really gotten involved in pyrotechnics to really trying to explain what is going on in the production of colors. We'll be talking about the two major classifications of fireworks: Class B, or display fireworks; Class C, or consumer fireworks, the kind you can use in your backyard. We'll show some examples and do a little chemistry and physics. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about government agencies. The only one we have to worry about is the last one on the list, the authority having jurisdiction. That's the local fire chief or even a township official. We're going to be talking about display fireworks now. These are the kinds that are the large shows that you would go to see, for example, on the 4th of July. Quite often these shows are now shot electrically, which means that you can have precise control of timing. The safety is better for the person in charge. However, there is a very long setup time and it's very expensive to do. Hand firing is much easier, faster, and cheaper, although it does involve a little more risk to the actual operator. This slide depicts what happens when a shell is fired. The fuse is lit, the lift charge explodes, the hot gases resulting from that explosion force the shell out of the mortar, at the same time lighting a time delay fuse. This fuse burns through to the interior of the shell, and when the shell is at its apogee, it ignites a burst charge, which then ignites the display which you see in the sky. There are two main varieties of display firework shells. The first is the cylindrical shell. It is typically European or American manufactured, generally results in an unsymmetrical break with fewer stars, but it does allow for multiple breaks to occur in one shell, so you can have several things following in sequence from a cylindrical shell. The typical cylindrical shell is 3 to 12 inches in diameter, and they can be up to 3 foot tall, although this is very rare and unusual. Most cylindrical shells are simply 3 to 6 inches tall and have a single display. Here is a cross-section of a typical cylindrical shell. Shells are manufactured so that essentially nothing falls back to the ground, everything burns up in the air, so these are typically made of craft paper and some cardboard. The cylinder itself is a craft paper tube. Perhaps there are some strings added for shell integrity, end discs of cardboard or chipboard. The prepared fuse burns through at a timed rate into the interior of the shell, where there is a burst charge, and the shell itself is packed with stars, or the display itself. The stars can be either cubes, cylinders, or balls of composition. They may be layered. This would result in color changes. They are usually built around a core, something like pasta or rice, and they're usually primed, which means they are coated with a very fast-burning material to make sure all the stars are lit. The other main category of display fireworks are round shells. These are anywhere from 1 to 24 inches in diameter, although usually they are 3 to 6 inches. The shells you see here are very unusual, very large. Round shells are typically Chinese or Japanese manufacture. They result in symmetrical breaks. They often depict flowers, so are given names like chrysanthemum, peony, or dahlia. And these can be quite spectacular depending on how many stars are in the shell and what else might go on. Another type of round display firework is the pattern shell. Most often seen is the ring shell, shown here. The view of these pattern shells depends strictly on the orientation of the shell when it breaks. Since there is no way to control the shell once it leaves the mortar, most oftentimes two or three shells of the same type are shot at the same time, so that at least one will be able to be seen by the audience in its proper orientation. Common patterns include rings, stars, hearts, or perhaps even two intersecting rings. These are getting to be much more complicated these days. There are also low-level display fireworks. These are effects that rise from the ground. And these are known as mines, comets, Roman candles, or in very rare cases, rockets. Mines are simply shells that do not have a lift charge, so the display rises from the ground. Comets are simply what you would expect, a large ball leaving a trail rising from the ground. Roman candles are multiple comets, if you will. You can also have set pieces or ground displays. These are words or designs made up of individual lances. Lances are small fountains or small fireworks that are connected by quick match or sticky match. This is a very rapidly burning match fuse so that all of the fountains are lit essentially simultaneously. Of course, you can have different colors, and with the proper mechanical engineering, you can even have some animation involved where circles would turn or some patterns would emerge from these ground displays. Daytime fireworks are very rare in the United States, although they are more common in Asia. They generally consist of colored smoke, parachutes, and of course, lots and lots of noise. Indoor fireworks are becoming much more common these days with indoor events such as rock concerts. Indoor fireworks require special needs. Of course, you're generally in a smaller space, so you need a smaller display. You want either no or very low smoke generation with no toxic byproducts produced. Because of these limitations, the indoor fireworks are most often white. And they're very expensive because they need high levels of quality, repeatability, and of course safety. The elements most commonly used in pyrotechnic compositions are shown in this periodic table as the highlighted boxes. This slide is actually a reproduction of an internet site from the PBS series Nova, and in it you could actually point to any of these elements and it would bring up a new screen showing you what the use of that particular element might be. It's an excellent site, and in fact all of the PBS sites are very good. The most commonly used chemicals in pyrotechnic compositions include potassium nitrate, potassium perchlorate, charcoal, and sulfur. Various metals including iron, aluminum, and magnesium, or alloys like magnesium. Dextrins, resins, nitrocellulose, cerans, chlorinated polymers, all of these things are used as additives and binders. Ammonium perchlorate is being used more often in indoor fireworks since it produces no solid oxide residues. Sodium benzoate and salicylate are used for whistling compositions, and of course other metal salts are used for colors. The most common material used in fireworks is of course black powder. Black powder is a mixture of potassium nitrate, charcoal, and sulfur in the ratio of 75-15-10 by weight. It produces approximately half of its products as gas and about half of its products as solids. The solids are the smoke that you see when black powder explodes. Here's some additional information for those of you that are interested in the chemistry. Of course, one of the best things about fireworks are the colors that are involved. However, early on, the only colors that were available ranged from faint reds to yellowish whites, and these were due to the temperature of the pyrotechnic reaction occurring. As you can see from this table, at about 500 degrees C, you generate a faint red glow, and that red gets to be orange, yellow, and finally perhaps white as the temperature increases to around 13 to 1500 degrees C. It was only with the advent of chemical science in the last 200 years or so that we were able to expand on these colors and go beyond just the temperature generation to generation of colors due to elements. Early chemists determined that certain materials would generate colors when exposed to a flame. This is our classic flame test that most of us learned in high school chemistry. For example, if we put a sodium salt into a flame, it produces a yellow color. Similarly, barium will produce green, copper will produce blue, and strontium or lithium will give you a red color. And here are the wavelengths for those of you that are interested. You can actually combine these materials to produce other colors. For example, combining strontium and copper, red and blue, will produce a purple color in the pyrotechnic composition. Let's briefly talk about some of the types of fuse that are used in fireworks. The paper fuse is relatively fast and generally used pretty much only in firecrackers these days. Visco fuse is a waterproof fuse that generally burns at a fairly set rate of about 1/2 inch per second. Time fuse is that material that's used on the interior of shells to give you a very exact burn rate. You can cut it to a certain length and know it will burn exactly that long. Black match is another type of internal fuse, usually burns at about 1 inch per second. Quick match burns very rapidly, 30 feet per second or more. This is the material used to fuse multiple pieces together like set pieces. Sticky match is similar. There's something new called no match, a very high-tech material that burns at almost 3,000 feet per second. This is material generated out of the blasting industry. We're now going to change gears and talk about the kinds of consumer fireworks that most people might find available in the local store around the 4th of July. Most common type of firework you can buy is, of course, the sparkler. There are two types. The first is the wire sparkler. It can burn either gold, red, or green, or perhaps even give off a crackling sound. The second type is on a wood stick. They're usually called morning glories, and they usually have a series of displays involving color changes. It's my recommendation that only with the wooden stick variety of sparkler be used. The wire sparklers result in that red-hot wire that needs to be disposed of, and in fact most fireworks injuries are due to wire sparklers after they're done. The other very common type of firework are firecrackers, although these are illegal in Michigan. They range from 1/2 to 1.5 inches in length, anywhere from 16 to 16,000 per pack, but regardless of the size of the firecracker, they can contain no more than 50 milligrams of flash powder per cracker. This is a federal requirement since the late 1960s. Any other type of firecracker is illegal around the country, and as I mentioned, although there are wide varieties of firecrackers, none of them are legal in Michigan. Another type of consumer firework is the fountain. These are usually single tube items, anywhere from 1/2 inch to 9 inches tall, and they shoot sparks, color, and perhaps noise up to 30 feet in the air. Here is a cross-section of a typical fountain, again consisting of a paper tube, a clay plug in the bottom, the remainder of the tube filled with a composition that burns and gives off the color. There may be a nozzle at the top. This will constrict the gases from coming out, resulting in a higher shooting fountain. And of course, just a simple fuse to light the material. Most fountains also have a base. There are lots of different types of fountains. These are some very small ones, but there are even some much larger ones available, and some of them have more than one effect. The next type of consumer firework we'll be talking about is the cone. Cones are very similar to fountains, shooting sparks and colors, stars, maybe perhaps 10 feet in the air, perhaps with a crackle or a whistle. Most cones these days are simply fountains wrapped up in a wrapper so that it looks like a cone. We'll speak briefly about rockets. Although rockets are illegal in Michigan, you can have whistling, crackling, display reports, and of course the classic pop bottle rocket. The rockets shown here have plastic fins. It's been my experience that these are very erratic, and if you're in a state where you can shoot rockets, I would definitely advise you to shoot a stick type rocket, whether it be the small pop bottle or the larger ones. Roman candles are another type of consumer firework, a fairly long tube that has a repeating effect, usually of shooting comets in the air, sometimes 5 to 30 feet. Roman candles come in all sizes, as do wheels, anywhere from 2 to 18 inches in diameter. Wheels use a nail as a pivot, and they can be color changing or whistling, and they simply spin around, giving a wheel effect. A Saxon refers to the special effect produced by a single long tube with a pivot point that spins around that pivot point, and the resulting display looks like a wheel, even though it's produced by a long tube. The next type of consumer firework we'll talk about are spinners. Aerial spinners actually are simply wheels that don't have a pivot point attached to anything, so they spin up into the air, some as high as 50 feet, leaving a trail of sparks, and they can end with a color or a report. There are various designs that can shoot up into the air. Some have wings, some don't. It all depends on the aerodynamics of the material being used. All aerials are illegal in Michigan, as are all spinners. Spinners are simply materials that spin on the ground and are not designed to rise into the air. The next type of consumer firework are the single tubes. These are very small display type fireworks. They are simply for one use. They shoot an effect quite high into the air, actually, and there are many different types that you can find in those states where they are legal. The next step up from the single tube item is the reloadable shell. These come with a single mortar tube with 6 to 12 separate shells that are inserted into the mortar and shot off from there. These are small display type fireworks, and they can be very impressive. The next type are called repeaters. These are multi-tube items shooting anywhere from 30 to 3 feet into the air, and they normally have multiple effects because they are multiple tube items. They are lit with one fuse, and then all the subsequent effects are timed by the repeater itself, and there are a wide variety of these things available with some fancy names like whistling colorful whirlwind or oriental thunder. Special effect items include things like strobes. These are flashing lights, defined as a chemical strobe. It's the chemical reaction that puts out pulses of light, usually very, very bright. Whistles are also produced by chemicals like sodium or potassium benzoate or salicylate, giving off a piercing shriek. However, this can be tuned and multiples used to produce a song. It's a very time-consuming operation. There are a wide variety of consumer fireworks under the category of novelties. Snakes, for example, are simply small balls of composition that, when lit, produce a long black ash that looks something like a snake. Of course, types of items that produce nothing more than smoke. Perhaps most of you are familiar with snaps, those little papers that you can throw on the ground and produce a snapping sound. There are special effects like the rising flag, the friendship pagoda, the balloon. This actually takes advantage of the gases given off by the black powder reaction to inflate a balloon. A variety of rolling fireworks like tanks, trucks, motorcycles that have little cardboard wheels. If you set them on a flat surface, they will roll along the ground when they're lit. And even something called an aircraft carrier, a paper boat that will float on the water and then will actually launch several helicopter-type planes from the deck of the aircraft carrier. Wide variety of different kinds of novelties that might be available, some of them even here in Michigan, including these stamps, friendship pagodas. These are things that will actually spin a little bit and result in a firework that you can take home afterwards. They're not actually consumed. Using the typical Michigan legal fireworks, you can produce your own backyard show. Here are a couple of examples. Pictures of a backyard show that I did here in town. These are all using legal fireworks, and here was a display trying to depict the class of '93 for a high school graduation show. So even with Michigan laws, which are safe and sane, allowing sparklers, fountains, cones, and many novelties, you cannot use rockets, firecrackers, spinners, aerials, single tube items, reloadable mortars, or Roman candles. So the Michigan law says that you cannot use anything that moves, explodes, or goes more than 10 feet in the air. You are allowed fountains, cones, sparklers, and those things, however, and with the proper planning, you can put on a very nice backyard show in Michigan. Let's talk quickly about safety. Here are some statistics for young teenagers out of 1995. Many more injuries from bicycles and fishing and skateboards these days than fireworks. So with the proper supervision, following the directions on the label, fireworks can be very safe. Never use any firework that you're unfamiliar with or has no instructions on it. There are a number of publications available if you'd like to read more about fireworks. American Fireworks News, the Journal of Pyrotechnics, and there's even a peer-reviewed journal called Propellants, Explosives, and Pyrotechnics. Some of these are available through the websites. There are a number of fireworks books available, some of them in our library, if you're interested in the chemistry of pyrotechnics or simply how fireworks are produced and shown. There are a number of sites on the internet where you can find excellent information on pyrotechnics. These are just a few of the better, including one on firework safety. Be careful of what you see on the internet, of course. Some things have a much better quality than others, and some refer to things that are quite likely illegal here in Michigan. If you're interested in photographing fireworks, here are a couple of suggestions from the Smithsonian site on the internet. Use a tripod and a manual camera, cable release if you have one, fairly slow speed film, long exposures depending on how many effects you'd like to see in a particular frame, a suggestion on f-stops, and of course prior to the show find your location, best location to get the best framing of your fireworks photographs. I hope you've enjoyed this brief description of pyrotechnics and fireworks. Please remember, if you're going to use fireworks on the 4th of July, read the instructions that come on the label. Always use them on a flat, level surface. Many of the fountains and cones tend to tip over, and although they will generally not cause a problem when they tip over, you lose the nice display that you are going to see. Only buy fireworks in the state of Michigan for use within the state. You can go out of state and buy many types of fireworks that will not be legal in Michigan, and we don't want you to have any troubles on the 4th of July. I hope you've enjoyed this program. Thank you for your attention.